The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the 6th day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 20th of Sivan, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Friday, June 5th, 2026. Tomorrow, we will read Parashat Beha'alotcha. Let's begin. Me'am Loez. We're going to learn Me'am Loez today on Parashat Beha'alotcha. This will be our last day of the week learning this particular parsha. We're going to continue talking about the Levites today. As we spoke about, if you've listened to previous episodes this week, we're counting Levi'im still, and we're actually dedicating them to service in the Mishkan, service in the tabernacle, and we've spoken about that a bit this week. What I want to talk about today is age. What we see all the time is that certain ages usually are given during the count of who is particularly counted based on their age requirements. And there's actually conflicting age requirements in terms of the Levi'im who are counted. We see in Parashat Bamidbar that the minimum age that a Levi should be counted as is from the age of 30. But in Parashat Beha'alotcha here, when we're talking about dedicating Levi'im, we're actually talking about Levi'im who are dedicated from the age of 25. So what's the deal? Why is there in one Parsha 30 and another Parsha 25? Well, the rabbis asked the same question, and the answer that they came up with is the idea is that starting at 25, the Levi'im would be dedicated for service in the Mishkan, and they would begin learning the specific laws that Levi'im need to know in order to serve in the Beit HaMikdash, and they would spend 5 years learning it. Then, at the age of 30, they would actually begin serving in the Beit HaMikdash actually. So service, actually doing the work, wouldn't start till 30, but the studying would begin at 25. I think there's a lot of important things to learn here. Before you do anything important in the Jewish community, you should study first. You should learn the laws and Jewish values based around that particular subject so you can make sure that your work is in accordance with those laws and rules. It's a great responsibility anytime you're picked to serve the Jewish community or you choose to serve the Jewish community, and we demonstrate that by giving time towards learning and sanctifying really time towards learning it. There's also another interesting idea I think that comes out of this from the Gemara. Usually there's an idea within the rabbis that a person who has learned seriously for 5 years and is making no progress, it means that they should no longer continue with their studies. Now, this might sound really harsh at first, right? You only had 5 years, and if you strike out, you don't get to learn anymore. I don't think that's really what's being said here. If you're trying, I think the way I at least read this source and read this midrash here is that if someone is trying to learn something for 5 years and just keeps hitting a wall, there must be something wrong with the way you're learning it, and you should change your way of learning so that you're able to you shouldn't just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, you need to do the same thing over and over again and work at it for a certain amount of time, because if you just give up prematurely, then how do you know if you just didn't put more effort or more time into it that you wouldn't be able to actually learn it? And that's why the rabbis sort of give this set amount of time, 5 years, so that you don't just continue wasting your time hitting yourself against the wall. I mean, the reason for learning Torah is to actually understand it and be able to actually do it. If you don't understand it, then you're certainly not able to do it. And then there really isn't that much point of Torah. Meaning, learning Torah is not just for, I'm going to do this mitzvah and put this page in front of my face and spend time doing this, but for you to actually learn something so you're actually able to do it. I think this is really, really essential. And let's be honest, intense intellectual Torah learning is not for absolutely everybody. For some, that might not be up their boat. And I think the rabbis make room for this in this nice ruling. Now, there's also something interesting that happens also on the top end as well. In chapter 8, verse 25 and 26, we see that the Levi'im work in the Beit HaMikdash and do their normal labor until they're 50. And then what happens after that? Well, they sort of retire from the workforce and don't serve anymore. But the verse says that in 25, but then in 26 it goes on and says, during their duty period, they shall perform their appointed task serving their brethren in the communion tent. They shall not, however, participate in the divine service. This is what shall be done for the Levites as far as their appointed tasks are concerned. And at least according to the way in which the rabbis interpret this, that that many of the services the Levi'im will no longer do because they're retired, but they are still kept on. And during their miluim period, or during their period where they're serving an active duty in the Beit HaMikdash, there's no Levi'im that served all year round. They served for a certain period of time, and they sort of took turns. What it basically says is that these older Levi'im should be given particular jobs so they continue doing something in the Beit HaMikdash. They shouldn't just not serve their miluim period, or not do anything, but they should be given tasks that they can do. Simple tasks such as the Me'am Loez list, closing the gates in the desert, loading the wagons for traveling on, and chanting in the sanctuary. All of these things that someone over 50 should be able to do. And so therefore that the Torah actually commands us for them to do it. And I love this sort of understanding of retirement is so different for us than the way we picture it, that you're just no longer at work. You don't do anything anymore. You're not of service in sort of the world that you used to be in. And the Torah seems to have a different and I think healthier understanding that, like, oh, yes, of course, you're not able to do the same exact job as you were doing before, but you're still able to help and you're still able to take part. And I love that the Torah sort of makes room for this, because I really think this is a great route to being a healthy retiree mentally and physically, of still doing and participating within the work of the community, and not just completely separating yourself from your area of knowledge or wisdom just because you've reached a certain age. Mishnah Torah. We'll continue learning the laws of Talmud Torah, the laws of Torah study in the Rambam, in the Mishnah Torah. We're on chapter 2, halacha 6, and we'll cover halacha 7 as well today, hopefully. So, this particular halacha is about obviously educating children here and how we educate our children in terms of their own learning. So the halacha states, a child may be transferred from one teacher to another teacher who is capable of teaching him at a faster pace, whether with regard to the written law itself or grammar. So what he's saying here is that the teacher the child should not just go to the teacher, whatever teacher is closest or most available or most easiest for the family to send them to, but a teacher that matches their intellectual ability, their unique capabilities of each student, and the parent really should look to find a teacher that is appropriate for each student, even if that means switching teachers and bringing them somewhere else that might be farther away. And this is really important. We don't do this enough, I think, in Jewish education, that really creating personalized learning for each and every individual. But we really need to focus both on students who can learn faster and making sure that they're getting what they need and able to learn at appropriate speed and depth for them. And also for the students who, I think, in the opposite direction, where they're not learning from a particular teacher or they're not able to understand for a certain reason, and to make sure it's not just drop them off at Hebrew school and just say, hey, do what you want to do. But the parent should be actively involved in making sure that the student has an appropriate teacher and that they are learning appropriately. Very important. Education doesn't happen by osmosis. Now, the interesting question that really is posed here is, what happens if, that the teacher could be possibly farther away, and has to travel much farther, like to another city, in order to get this education. And that's where the Maimonides sort of puts a stop in this and says it shouldn't be too far away. Like, you shouldn't have to cross a river to get there in the next city, because one, that could be dangerous. And unless there is, really strong transportation, so that make sure that the child isn't put in danger by doing this. So, obviously the child's health comes before their Torah study, and I think this is really important, right? If the laws and the Torah keeps telling us how important it is to educate children, the most important thing. They need to be educated appropriately according to their level. Like literally the whole entire, we've learned previously, the whole entire world stands on the breath of Israel, of the Jewish people's children learning Torah. If it's that important, maybe you might say, well, I sometimes might have to risk my child's well-being, or in whether physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, in order for them to continue learning Torah at an appropriate level. And this, of course, is always wrong. And the Rambam, I think, puts this halakha in this for this reason. So very, very important, this balance between the child's health and their ability to continue learning efficiently. The seventh halakha, also very, very interesting. It's the case of someone who wants to open a schoolhouse The first case really that it presents is someone who wants to open a schoolhouse out of their house, out of their home, in sort of their apartment complex. That's what I'll say here. It's a little more complicated than that, but in in a neighbor's home, does the neighbor sort of have a right to say, it's going to be noisy, the kids are going to be going in and out all day, it's really going to change my living experience, what we would call NIMBYism here. And Maimonides, of course, says absolutely not. The neighbor is not allowed to protest this decision, and the education of children definitely overcomes the comfort of one's neighbors necessarily in terms of noise and atmosphere, and that all of Bnei Israel together have to be committed to educating children in whatever way they can. And in some ways, a more interesting case here, I think, is like what happens when another teacher sets up a schoolhouse next to a pre-existing school. Now, obviously, there's some competitive aspect here, and the first teacher, the first school, might be upset that another school opened up so close. It might take away their students or everything like this. And so the question is may the first teacher say, you're hedging my business, you're taking away my clients and everything like this. How can you do that? And usually in business situations, you actually can do this. There is a concept in Jewish law. It's very complicated, so we're not going to get into it today. But of sort of what's called hasagat gavul, or taking territory in someone's particular business, and that actually too much competition actually is considered against halacha in Jewish law. Something that makes it very different, I would say, than American law. But here, certainly, teaching Torah and teaching children is not a business. Even if the teacher is making money off of teaching students, and we've discussed in the halachic ability of making money off of teaching Torah previously, even if they are making some money off of this, they cannot protest someone setting up another school, because again, if that helps students and the students are able to learn more Torah is being learned by children, it must be seen as a good thing, because the reason one is teaching Torah is not to increase the amount of money in one's pockets, or to be successful in oneself, or to have the most students, or for one's ego, but of course is for the sake of Hashem. And I think this is an important halacha for us. But in our Jewish community today, our modern Jewish community, there's just so much competition. And I would say, look, some of it's healthy in that it helps, organizations progress and get better in a quicker way and respond to the needs of the community. So that's wonderful. But oftentimes I think it's really not healthy. When shuls get really angry that a member goes to an event at another shul, or schools that are competing one against the other, and everything like this, and trying to sort of and really seeing them as very separate things. In the end, a Torah school and a Torah school, whatever Torah school it is, it's all part of Bnei Israel. It's all part of this divine mission, and it needs to be seen as one big, beautiful thing. We cannot be seen as in competition with each other. That is letting the money talk and not our values. And we have to remember that if you go to a Reform synagogue, or an Orthodox synagogue, or a conservative synagogue, or a Chabad, or anything else, it is, and as long as it's a Jewish synagogue, that is a wonderful thing. And I don't think that communities should be upset, even if they lose money because of this in the short term, because in the end, Jews going to synagogue and taking part in Jewish life is what matters, not what particular kind of Judaism they observe or what label they are, but the fact that they're trying to serve Hashem, trying to learn Torah, and trying to be part of Klal Yisrael. That's what really matters. So we really have to see each other as one grand unity in this project. Menorat HaMaor. We're going to spend a third session of Menorat HaMaor on the stories of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. We talked first about the beautiful prayers of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa and how potent they were. We talked in the last episode about the challah of Rabbi Hanina, or challah not so much, the miraculous challah that was built for his wife. The point of all these stories is to show how someone's social status and where they are, or their money troubles, doesn't mean that they can't be close to God and dedicated to Torah learning. Very, very important, because Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was quite poor, as all these stories show. Now, so far we've seen that it's been mostly Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa praying for himself. He prays, right, for it not to rain. If you were listening like 2 episodes ago, that that it's not going to rain and rain on his head or ruin the salt that he had on his head that he wanted to sell. He then prays for his wife to have challah, and so that she's not embarrassed, and then a golden table leg. But interestingly enough, we see that all of these things, when it's for himself and for himself specifically, he never asks for these things for himself, and usually, if he does, he usually regrets it afterwards and asks God to return it. Now, you might say, okay, that's nice for Rabbi Hanina that he's making these decisions for himself, that he doesn't want these miracles and he wants to sort of live an ascetic life, and is willing to live that life to commit to Torah learning. And that's wonderful for Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. He should be honored. But I think it's important to know that someone who's trying to live a more ascetic lifestyle or a more spiritual lifestyle and is choosing to cut some things out of their life that other people would do that are permitted, but maybe not so spiritual, that is not something that anybody should put on anybody else or expect from anybody else. And I think that can happen a lot of like very spiritual people, is that they themselves feel very close to Hashem, but when they treat other people and when they talk to other people, they are so angry at them because, well, they're not doing any of that. And all they see is, look how evil these people are. They're so focused on this world, and you can become a very angry person doing this. It's a very big temptation for someone who's striving to be just a little bit more holy. And I think that's why in the story, we're going to tell the stories that we are going to tell today, is all miracle stories that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa did for others. And so we see that the first story, one Friday evening, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa saw that his daughter was sad. He said to her, "Why are you sad?" She replied, "I accidentally exchanged the container of oil with a container of vinegar and poured vinegar into the lamp." He said to her, "He who told the oil to burn can tell the vinegar to burn." It was taught that the lamp continued burning until enough lit remained for Havdalah after Shabbat. So she had light all Shabbat long from this beautiful lamp that she had lit from vinegar, which usually can't light, and that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa sort of did this miracle on behalf of his daughter. And so that's one miracle that's done for somebody else. And interestingly enough, we see that this miracle isn't taken back, right? He doesn't regret this. Same sort of thing next. He had some goats, and the people came and said to him, "Your goats are damaging the fields." He replied, "If they are causing damage, let bears eat them. But if they are not causing damage, let each goat return with a bear hanging from its horn." That evening, each goat came back carrying a bear by its horns. Right? So we see here, this seems like a little bit more for his benefit, possibly, but really it's for the benefit of showing people that they're not being stolen from, right? There's this big problem sort of in rabbinic times of goats sort of going and eating grass that's not on fields they own and sort of ruining crops for other people. So this is a really big problem. And rabbis have a lot to say about shepherds for this reason and the honesty of shepherds. They sort of think all shepherds are sort of thieves, but that's a bigger story somewhere else. But I think what's going on here is to show that Rabbi Hanina is honest and that nobody's being stolen from and that these people don't need to worry. Finally, there was once a certain neighbor who said to him, "I have a house, but the roof beams do not reach from wall to wall." He asked her, "What is your name?" She answered, "Levu." He said, "Levu, Levu, let the beams reach," and the beams immediately stretched until they reached their proper place. So all these stories, I think these three stories are all like in some ways simple miracle stories. But they are actually helping real people who are in need. And Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa could have easily said to these people, he could have said to his daughter, "Why do you need light necessarily? Why do you need the comfort of light? You don't need this. This is not what's important." Or to the people who are afraid about their grass, like, "Why do you care? The goats are eating. Like, you shouldn't care about such things of this world." Or look how great a rabbi I am. You should be honored that my goats are eating from your grass. Or lastly, why do you care that your house is very sturdy and strong? And you should just get used to it and just study Torah and live ascetically like me. And he never says these things to anybody because, again, I think this is showing us that if you're going to be ascetic and you're going to be more spiritual than others, you should never demand that or expect that from anybody else. Actually, the more so, you should be even more compassionate and more good to others and giving. And you don't get your sort of share in the world to come depleted by necessarily doing miracles for the benefit of other people, even if for very physical things. So this shows all in all that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was a wonderful, wonderful spiritual figure and has a lot to teach us about how to be a spiritual person in this world. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.